it's Yaz from Yorkshire Peaches Therapies. Welcome back to another episode of Hop, Skip and a Jump. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Stacey of Hozho Hounds. I met Stacey a few years ago and I was just completely blown away by her knowledge and passion for canine nutrition. So let's jump into it. Right. So, Stacey, we have been talking for the past hour and a half, so I thought actually it'll be a really good time to maybe start the podcast.
Just maybe a little idea.
Just maybe a little idea. So, you have started a new membership, this F.E.T.C.H membership. Now, I haven't read much about it because I want to hear it right from the horse's mouth. Tell me and tell the listeners, what is this F.E.T.C.H membership? What is it? Tell me.
Well, thank you for having me on, first of all. Thank you.
You're welcome. Always free to call with you, darling. Always free to
call. An hour and a half of nattering has felt like 5 minutes. But F.E.T.C.H, essentially, it's a joint venture with my amazing and wonderful colleague, Alexia Meller, who is Mystic Dog Mama.
Yes, please do listen to that podcast as well. Phenomenal content. I was on there. That sounded really arrogant to say that, but there is like some absolute proper in-depth, juicy content on there. We love her. We love her.
And so Alexia and I met doing our L3 and some other courses, and we liaised a lot on cases and stuff, and be like, well, what are you doing with this, and what's happening with this, and what do you think about that? And we'd go down rabbit holes together because who doesn't love a rabbit hole?
And just to confirm, your L3 was about canine nutrition.
Yes, that's just
no, you're all right.
because we're in conversation, so you would know, but not everyone else would. So we started to look at how we were putting together our kind of recommendations that we were doing for the dogs that we were working with, and we were kind of recognizing a bit of a pattern. We were like, oh, okay, so we're doing that, and then we're doing that, and then so that's how F.E.T.C.H got started, this whole idea, because what we wanted to do is create something that was a framework that people could start to learn and understand how they could support their dog for themselves and do essentially what we were doing, and learn how to make those decisions and feel comfortable doing it, and advocate for their dog when they're talking with their vet or with you or with other practitioners that might be involved within their dog's care. So essentially F.E.T.C.H is fresh food, energetics, targeted approaches, curiosity, and then holistic health. So it's each step kind of builds on each part. So we start with the fresh food. So Alexia and I are both big proponents of the fact whether it's raw or cooked. A lot of dogs actually, I think, need to start on lightly cooked because it's just a much better transition. It's much more gentle on the digestive system. And then you actually start to absorb some of the goodies. We were having a conversation earlier about some of the dogs that I've worked with that once they actually get the cooked in, actually start to absorb stuff, whereas raw can be a little bit of a shock to the system almost, I think. So
absolutely. I think well, for those listening who maybe don't have a nutritional background, so I recommend cooked food, especially for my sensitive dogs, before we make that leap into maybe raw. I mean, we might not ever get to raw, we might not ever get to 100% raw. It's going to be different for every single dog, but for those really sensitive dogs, I recommend cooked first. If we slightly denature that fresh food, it's going to be less of an assault on the body, and not as rich and not as heavy when you cook it. So yeah, sorry, carry on. I just wanted to add that.
So for fresh food for us, it's raw or cooked, and like we said, ideally initially it will more than likely be cooked, and just trying to how we make that easier, because I think we've got so caught up in the spreadsheet feeding mentality.
Yes,
which it doesn't have to be that complicated. So it's about creating awareness about what dogs actually need and how we can provide that using fresh food. And then the E is about energetics. We both love TCM and how the impact of food energetically, and then the dog energetically, how they match up. So just investigating that next layer. So we've got the food, but could we tweak it a little bit more and bring in some energetics and feed certain proteins that may be at different seasons, and how do we play around with their diet? And
so then for those who haven't come across energetics before, what if you could summarize energetics in 2 sentences? What would be your summary?
Your dog has an energetic profile. Food has an energetic profile, and it's kind of combining the two. So if you've got a hot dog, we need to look at more cooling neutral proteins, and if you've got a cool dog, we need to look at more warming and neutral. But again, we don't want to use them all the time because we don't want to send them too far into either side of the spectrum. It's about balance, but just being aware of what your dog is and how you can tweak their diet accordingly with looking at the energetics. So yeah, it's
beautiful explanation. I love talking about food energetics as well. It's stuff that I've written about before. I don't know it to the depth that you and Alexia will know it, but the way that I explain food energetics is everyone knows what the yin and yang symbol looks like. You've got night and day, hot and cold. So when we have younger dogs, they're hot usually, they're quite fizzy. And as they go through that aging process and systems start to slow down, potentially become a little bit stagnant, that's when we start to get colder as we get older. So sometimes with older dogs, I find that they go for the raw food, because where do we get our raw food from? We get it out of the fridge, don't we? We've defrosted it on the fridge. It's frozen. I mean, sometimes if you're really bad like me, you forget to fully defrost it, so it might be a little bit frozen when you're giving it to the dogs. Whereas when they're older, they might actually go off their food a little bit because they can't tolerate the temperature anymore, because you're adding cold into cold. And again, like you say, removing ourselves further away from that balance that we're looking for in life, and depending on the environment that we're in and what's going on with that dog with regards to disease or anything like that, that balance is constantly changing. So like you said, we have to adapt to match the dog and match what's going on with the dog as well. So I just wanted to
and I can give you a really great example actually of how that happened with Ted, my dog, recently. So he's actually quite a hot dog, and in the summer I have to stick with the cooler proteins, and I'd never even really thought about a cooked diet for Teddles. But in January he wears a coat when he's out because he's nearly 10, so I want to keep his joints warm and everything. And even though he's a warm boy, it's been minus something, so I want to
it's been bitter.
So we'd gone on a walk with a friend, and he'd had his breakfast as normal about an hour and a half before we left for walkies. And we'd gone down to a stream, and we were walking back up, and he just stopped. And I was like, what's going on? And he was just holding his paw. And I was like, what's he done? Oh no, what's he done? And I'm checking him for cuts, and he wasn't even yelping. He was just holding it. It was like it was stuck. And I was like, what's going on here? Then I realized it was cramp. And he'd literally, because the ground was cold, he was cold. I had to carry him for about 10 minutes. He's 18 kilos, stupid. So it was not an easy task trying to climb up a hill. But it suddenly got me thinking. I was like, right, hang on a minute. He's nearly 10. It's cold. Just because he used to be able to handle the raw food in the winter, there's a shift, something's happened. So I've started, and because of the way I feed him, kind of a DIY approach to raw, I can just cook his offal and his meat portions up, and I just cook it for him and I warm it up. We've had no cramp since, and we've had similar temperatures. So that is the adaptation. It's just that and that leads into kind of the T for the targeted approaches. How can we take those other bits and do we have to change seasonally? Do we have to change what supplements we're using seasonally, because there could be other things going on. So for Ted, I might go back to raw when we get to kind of warmer temperatures in the spring, but I will play it by ear and see. It might just be that because he's older now, it needs to be cooked. I don't know. I'll just play around with it and see how he responds to that. But his digestion has been so much better. It's been a fascinating little experiment, kind of just to see it happen in real life. Like, okay, so that's what's happened. But
it's the same for us, isn't it? Really, it's like what do we crave in summer and what do we crave in winter? In summer, I'm not craving a cottage pie. There's really warm and homely and starchy. You're craving something lighter. I remember when my mum, as soon as there was any bit of sunshine, that was it. Salad was out. Got to have a salad, bit of ham, bit of lettuce. All of that. And even now I find that you're craving salads during the summer months. So it's cooling, it's predominantly cool and hydrating. Whereas in the winter, you want soups and heavier meals. Like, can you imagine having sausage and mash in summer? Like, I just think that's ludicrous. I think that's crazy. But imagine having a salad for your tea in December, like you'd be like, oh no. So we do it. It's almost instinctually. It's part of us, and dogs I find are so much more in tune to their instincts than what we are. You know, this is what I see all the time in my herbal sessions. If you allow them choice and offer them choice, they instinctively know what they should be working with. But it's, as pet parents, it's about having that knowledge to know that you can offer something different. And again, it's moving away from that spreadsheet mindset, that, you know, just stepping away from that. Ugh, I hate spreadsheet feeding. But we were talking about earlier, we were talking about this feeding a variety. So talk to me more about that.
Yeah, I think we've got so caught up in the spreadsheet thing, and I think that complete and balance, that word, has just become ingrained on our brains as this kind of goal of what we should, of that every bowl has to be complete and balanced. And I'm not saying that we don't need to be aware of what's going in the bowl. We do, and we need to have an awareness about that. We need some omega-3s, and that we need a vitamin E source, and we need a zinc source. But it's just making that easier for people, because I think it has just become that you know, you need a degree to be able to feed your dog, or you need to be able to go onto a formulator to be able to create a meal. But my issue, I mean, I do use a formulator occasionally, and even then, when you put in a product and then it will say missing data somewhere, because somewhere in there it hasn't got all the data. And some of that data is from this, I think Alexia found one, I think it was quail, was from like 1970, and I'm like, well, the nutritional value of a quail from 1970 is going to be very different from the one that we've got now, because you're not taking into account soil depletion and all those other factors that are a part of what our food actually contains now. And I think, who was that? There was an amazing lady, she's based over in India, and she got a sample of a sample of the liver, 2 different livers, and she had them analysed for their like nutritional value, and they both varied.
Of course they do, because that's nature. We can't put nature in a box. Depending on what time of day you harvest something in, like about herbs, or, you know, when you cut those herbs, depending on the time of day is going to affect the energetic profile, but also the nutrient profile. So when the sun is out, everything is up, it's in the plants, we're like, ooh, we're taking all this energy in, all the photosynthesis, all the good stuff. But as the sun goes down, all the, you know, the plant closes up and everything goes into the root. So if I'm harvesting dandelion because I want the green bit, that is the top part of the aerial aspect of the plant, I will harvest that kind of midday. As you know, has the sun been out? Yeah, we've been good. Okay, lovely, Jubilee. It's going to be full of all that goodness. It's going to be really fizzy with energy. But if I'm harvesting dandelion for its root, I wouldn't go in the middle of the day, because all the goodness is up in the leaf. It's the bottom bit that I want. So I'd harvest it much later on, because all the goodness goes back into the root. So of course, the same applies. Of course, the same applies for, you know, depending on how, you know, if we look at it from a protein perspective. So say cattle. So depending on how that cow has been reared, you know, is it free range? If it hasn't been raised free range, that's actually going to affect the calcium ratio in the bones, because if they've not been walking about as much, the calcium production turnover hasn't been as much, because they've been stood in a factory farm or anything like that. And that's not to say that we should only feed free range and organic, because that is just not, it's not achievable for me to feed 3 dogs and 3 ferrets organic all the time. It just isn't. However, what I do is I rotate in organic and free range throughout the week. And that's what's manageable for me. If you can feed organic all the time, that's incredible. But if you can't, we don't need to demonize people for not feeding, you know, free range and organic. And that's what drives me insane sometimes about the holistic industry, really. We were talking about this earlier, and that word has become muddied almost, hasn't it? So tell me your thoughts on that word, holistic.
Well, the thing is, it's a really beautiful word, and when we look at it properly from holism, we're looking at everything. That's what we should be focusing on. But I think it's become an either-or camp, and actually that's even detracted from what holistic means, because some people may have heard me talking about flexi camping before. It's my little analogy of kind of like what we should be doing and dipping in and out of everyone's camp. So like you've got all the
camping.
See, so that's what we should be doing, man. Like seriously, we should be having these conversations with people and that are in other camps so that we can build those bridges and just there's common ground in all of us. And so if you're just looking at the dogs, for example, we all want to help the dogs.
Yeah.
And there's common ground in each of those camps in the fact that we want to help the dogs and that, but it's become so radicalized in certain places that by looking at everything holistically, but to look at the whole and the whole dog. So whether that's pain, whether that's diet, whether that's exercise, all of those components of what we want to look for a healthy dog, it's become so distorted and so kind of twisted that we've just lost track of, or that's how it feels to me anyway, that we've kind of lost track of what we're actually aiming for. And we've because we've created so much resistance between all the camps and the conversation needs to change. And that's
100%.
That's what F.E.T.C.H is really about, trying to change that conversation. And that's where the C for the curiosity comes in. Like, what can we get curious? Can we ask more questions? Can we look at other options? And then that's the holistic health at the end, kind of what approaches can we bring in and how do we look at the whole dog and whether that involves using pain relief or whether that uses herbs or whether that's hydrotherapy, but how do, or you know, and even healing modalities, how do we bring all of that in and create those questions and ask better questions? Now I would say the curiosity bit for me is probably the really interesting bit because that's the rabbit hole bit, but it's I could go off on a huge tangent now.
Go for it.
Only in the fact that, so my boys are both home educated. They're 17 and 14 now, and they've been out of the school system for 8 years. Now you're going to think, why is this even related to dogs? But there is. Bear with me.
No, I'm here.
So the fact is that for me, the education system just teaches us to be kind of takers in of information and rather than question, and not in an argumentative way, but just curiously ask questions like, oh, is that the only side of that discussion, or is there another side that I could look at? And for me, that's part of what the education system has caused, this kind of one size fits all. And it doesn't allow us to feel comfortable asking questions and advocating and speaking up and just go, well, you know, could I just see a data sheet on that? Could I just take 24 hours to think about that? For example, if we're in with the vets and we're having a conversation, if it's not critical right in that moment, it's okay to ask and it's okay to have those conversations. But I think we've been shut down so much by the education system to just learn what you need to learn to pass a test. And I've seen a very, very different side of education, and I've had to break down my own kind of understanding of what education really is with home educating my boys, and even that has encouraged my learning to kind of learn to look at the whole picture. And it just takes us back to the holistic thing. It's the whole thing. There's more than just one. There's no right or wrong. There's many facets to it. So I could go on for hours about the education system.
No, honestly, that's so interesting. Like a word that you said was resistance. There's resistance between each camp, even though we've all got the common ground of wanting to help the dog. When I'm working with dogs, so stretching is something that I don't like to do in clinic. And if there's any physios listening, they'll be like, what on earth? Oh my God. And I'm like, listen, hear me out. When a dog, so when I'm working with a dog and say that they're laid down and they're in the recumbent position, right? If they are like nearly asleep and we've been doing some lovely work in, say, a forelimb, I might offer a little bit of effleurage. Can you stretch with me? And it's about working with me, right? If I go to stretch a limb and the dog goes, no, and it's like, hang on a minute, I've just watched you walk outside. I know that mechanically your limb can go here and it's not going here. I call it the emotional point of bind. So you've got the physical point of bind and you've got the emotional point of bind. So if this shoulder's really bad, so I'm not going to use it as an example, but this shoulder here, someone says, can you, so if I hold my arm out like this, I wouldn't consider that a stretch. It's just, my arm is just existing. It's when I take it there, you go, ooh, okay, that's a little bit of a stretch. If someone was to take my arm and do that stretch, actually my ability would be a lot lower because I've put an emotional point of bind on that stretch because I don't trust that you can feel the experience of discomfort that I feel, and you are more likely to take me past my emotional point of bind. So with resistance, so whether we think it's valid or not, if we meet resistance with more resistance, you're just going to butt heads about stuff. So the resistance between each camp, just because I have a slightly different way of thinking about things, doesn't mean that everything I say should be discredited. We need to learn to listen. If we listen, and if I waffle on for half an hour and you've taken one thing away from that, ace, absolutely awesome. And I think when it comes to say like the veterinary professionals, if I have to remind myself again to listen. So I'll be in a vet appointment going, well, I don't agree with that. And I'll be having like the conversation with, okay, that's the bit I wanted. Perfect. I agree with that. Because if I met that conversation with resistance, I'm just going to get resistance back. Resistance can only meet resistance. Yeah. So that was my tangent way to say we need to listen to each other, because we all have something to bring to the table when it comes to pain management, or even management of nutrition as well. Like we've all got something to say about it. And I always say to pet parents, listen, it's about making an informed choice. I'll give you a buffet of options. You decide what you think is best for your dog, because you live with them. Everyone's got opinions, and it's just about, like you said, that flexi camping. What an amazing analogy. You should get that trademarked.
Yeah, that was me and a friend on a walk one day, and we were just like, everyone should just flexi camp, and it just kind of stuck, because that's what it is. If we could all just, and it comes a lot from the kind of home educating side of things, that we've had to look at and challenge our own thinking about it. And again, but I think even making decisions for your dog can feel alien to so many people, because they're so used to just kind of handing over that agency to other people. Like, you make a decision, because they've kind of lost that ability to connect with themselves. And I think that's part of the not necessarily the problem, but I think we need to nurture that and reconnect with ourselves, and to trust our instincts and feel into what feels right for our dogs. And and that's what we say. It's about finding things that work for you, your belief system, where your level of risk feels, all of those things. It's understanding where you are as much as it is where the dog is.
That level of risk, talk to me about that. That is so interesting. Talk to me about where people have differing levels of risk.
Yeah, because I think this is the primary thought when I think about that kind of level of risk conversation, is about the flea and tick and the wormers and stuff, and where people's level of risk for using those products comes. Like, are they going to use them because they are absolutely terrified that their dog's going to get them because they walk in the woods every day and they're eating poo and they're off being dogs? Or does that risk feel low because you feel confident that you've built a healthy immune system, because you've come at it from a different place? So, but it's honoring that for people, because it can be really scary. That risk of stepping away from mainstream is huge and can feel terrifying, to go to your vet, well, no, actually, I'm not going to do that. And the vet goes, whoa. And that's part of that same conversation, because I think that they get, being able to take a risk to do things differently, that's a risk in itself, isn't it? And actually choosing to do it a different way. And I mentioned it briefly when we were talking earlier, but I was speaking to a vet nurse in I work at the Dog HQ in Horsham, which is a kind of raw and holistic natural treats shop. And there was a vet nurse that came in, and she was just like, I'm really interested in raw feeding, but I'm terrified about it because of everything I've been told. And we had an amazing conversation. So she was flexi camping, and I was flexi camping, listening to her side and what she'd been told. So it was a really lovely opportunity. And she couldn't believe the amount of people that were in the shop, and she was going, I didn't realise this many people fed fresh. And I was like, this is what we need to change, because vets are going to have to come along with the fact that people are doing their own research now and starting to feel more confident in those choices. So we need to meet each other in the middle. So how do we do that? how do we start to bridge that gap between the two?
I think as well with the veterinary industry, do I blame them for not liking raw? Not one bit. Not one bit. And the reason is it can be done very badly. If you go to the supermarket, buy your beef mince, and that is all you feed your dog, it won't be straight away that you see any difference of ill health. It'll be years down the line where they're deficient in you know an abundance of vitamins and minerals, and it causes really serious health concerns. You know, is feeding just chicken wings suitable for the rest of that dog's life? Absolutely not. But when does the vet see your dog? It's when they're ill. So I have, you know, and as well, like with the natural treats and stuff like that, just because it's natural doesn't mean that you shouldn't be supervising your dog when they're eating them. You know, if they're an absolute gobbler machine, you know, would I be giving them something that can really bite on? No, I'd be giving them something softer, because actually it's not the bone that breaks the tooth, it's the bite force that breaks the tooth. So that level of risk is just, it's so interesting. So for me, I choose not to vaccinate my dogs anymore. And for me, like, I'm like, yeah, I don't even think about it. Like, I am not sweating that decision. However, when I first started fresh feeding, the thought of not vaccinating my dogs kept me up at night, and I was really conflicted, like, oh my God, is this the right thing to do? Because of what I'd been taught and what I'd been told already by the veterinary profession. Again, they will only see dogs when they are poorly from when they've not had the vaccination. So, you know, can you imagine how absolutely emotionally traumatizing it is for a veterinary professional to try and save a litter of puppies that have got parvo and they all die? So of course to them they'll be like, why on earth are you not vaccinating? It's because they're trying to protect you from further hurt. So when I say things about canine health, it's because I have made mistakes and I'm trying to protect you from further health. And again, it comes back to this: we all want the same thing for our dog, you know. And for some people, not vaccinating is just a step too far. They're comfortable with the fresh feeding and they've stopped flea and worm treatment, and they do, you know, like the fecal lab stuff, you know, absolutely fine. But vaccination, just step too far, and that's okay. That's all right. It's about finding, like you say, where your personal level of risk. I mean, mine haven't been flea'd and wormed for, crikey, I think it was, I started raw feeding, then I stopped the flea and worm, and then it was another year and I stopped vaccinating. So raw feeding was almost like a gateway. It was a gateway to peeking behind that curtain and going, I can do things differently. And then I just became obsessed with learning. And it's about us taking those big chunky bits of research, digesting them, and then creating it in a format that's going to be accessible to pet parents. They don't want to have to sift through. I mean, you might want to sift through research, but it's our job as paraprofessionals to digest it and make it manageable for the pet parent, to make it accessible. Because don't you find sometimes that, like, you know, like, only feed your dogs filtered water, and if you're going to be giving them, you know, brassic vegetables like broccoli, it needs to be steamed in filtered water, and then it needs to have a splash of pink Himalayan salt. And then I'm like, if you've got any like tidbits left over from something, you know, just chuck that in, chuck it in. So I just think if we make it too militant, it becomes unachievable for some people, and it scares people off. We don't want to scare them off. We are crazy.
That social media effect that can happen, where it just feels overwhelming, because either it's coming from the spreadsheet gang that you know, if you haven't got enough magnesium that day, you know, it's catastrophic. And then you've got the other ones that are like, just put everything in their bowl, and you're like,
yes, the dusty bowl.
But then that's too much. Like, what do I actually really need to give them? What are the supplements or the additions that I need to add in daily or every couple of days or over the course of a week? It's just creating that awareness, and that's primarily why Alexa and I kind of put together F.E.T.C.H, because we wanted to make sure that we gave people an opportunity to work through each of those sections so they could feel into what one was right for them, and understand about fresh feeding, that it doesn't have to be terrifying, and that, you know, Alexa and I are big on sustainability and how we can use the food that we're eating to feed our dogs, you know. And like you said, leftover veggies, beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Why wouldn't
just
you?
bang them in, just bang them in. Like, and I think as well, like with what you were saying about that again, it comes back to that level of risk and explaining to other professionals. Yes, there is a risk with fresh feeding, but you know what? There's a risk with kibble feeding as well. There's a risk if you kibble feed badly. You know, if people are just feeding is it a mixer, like a kibble mixer? They're not designed to be eaten every day. It's the same way that we know that if we ate a cheese sandwich for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 10 years, we'd end up very poorly. And the same is applicable to our dogs. If you don't, I mean, it's changing away from that kibble mindset, isn't it? If you don't have the time to rotate your proteins, you might not, you know, it might be a financial thing, you might not have room in the freezer, you might have someone immunocompromised in the house, you might have a young baby, like that things that, oh, you know, like terrify you. Make your life easier. Research shows that if we change 20% of that bowl, we are going to be making a difference. If your dog does really well on a certain brand of kibble and you really don't want to move away from it, try changing the proteins. Have a look at what else they've got in that range. If that's what sits comfortably with you and your budget, if you can add in a bit of fresh, bang it in. If you can do filtered water, give them some filtered water. Bit of bone broth. Can't go wrong with a bit of bone broth.
Exactly. And all of those are such easy little changes, but they can be that. And it might be that you do that for a year and then you dabble in the next thing and then you dabble in the next thing, because that's how we learn. And when we start to feel comfortable or we start to see the benefits, just, oh, well, actually, I've noticed, you know, on the days that he has that, he's a little bit better, or, you know, it's just building on. And again, that comes back to the risk thing, because you take a little risk and then you go, oh, I can take another one. And it's just, how do you build on that? But again, I think because we have become so disassociated from being able to make decisions for ourselves or feel comfortable with it, it's like we've become so disconnected from the ability to kind of feel confident in making decisions. And
and comfortable to question as well, and to question. I think it's you know, if a customer's got a question for me, absolutely. If I've said something and you want to question that, go for it. I will absolutely tell you, you know, why I have said something, because I always say, don't take everything we say as gospel. Just because I've said it doesn't mean it's absolutely concrete. I mean, I don't talk shit, but if you are not 100% with something I've said, ask me. So this situation came up with a dog, and I've been looking after this dog for years and years and years, and his parents feed his kibble, and that's where they're happy, that's where they're staying. I'm like, absolutely fine. They vaccinate the flea and worm. That's okay. That's all right. That's your dog. You know my opinion about it, but it's about not shaming you in those choices, because that feels right for you. So that's fine. And they asked me my thought on leptospirosis vaccinations. So I went, okay. So with lepto, I said, you can't teeter test for it. I said, so there's no need to, you can't test for any kind of immunity. I was like, leptospirosis comes from this. This is what it may look like in your dog. This is a big if you catch it soon enough, it can be treated successfully with antibiotics. But 9 times out of 10, it's not caught soon enough. And we end up going into liver failure. When there's liver failure, there's kind of like no coming back from it. So those are your risks, okay, that your dog could get leptospirosis. I was like, well, let's have a look at the environment that your dog is in. So we started talking about that. And then I said, have we ever had a leptospirosis vaccination? And they'd had lepto, so there was lepto 2, lepto 4, and they'd had a lepto 4, and the dog was really, really poorly. Like, absolutely like shitting out the eye of a needle, like really, really ill. And after a few days, luckily it passed. And then from that moment on, they've gone absolutely never a lepto 4. Tried him with a lepto 2, and he was okay. But now they're discontinuing lepto 2.
It's gone now.
So they went, oh my God, what do we do? And so I explained to him, right, lepto 2 does this, lepto 4 does this. I said, I haven't read enough about lepto 6, but I imagine it's going to follow the same pattern of protecting against 2 strains, 4 strains, 6 strains. I said, if 2 we were okay, 4 was catastrophic. You have I think he's 9 years old. I said, you have a 9-year-old dog, and you're potentially looking at this. And like, I stopped because I was thinking, get your words right. And then I said, if it was my dog, I would never give a Lepto-6 vaccination. I said, I wouldn't even give any Lepto vaccination. I said, but that's me. And he started laughing. I said, you know what I'm like? I said, I wouldn't even risk it. I said, because I've seen the fallout from Lepto vaccinations. I said, but that's my choice and that's my risk to take. And he went, I don't think I can do it. And I said, if it doesn't feel right and the risk is too big, don't do it. I said, but what you have to do is make yourself aware of what that disease looks like. Then they asked, you know, well, his insurance will be void. And I said, no. I was like, if he was to catch leptospirosis and he had to receive hospital treatment, because there is a vaccination available for that, you would be liable for the bill. If, however, he broke his leg, touch wood, that's not going to happen, the vet bill is covered. I said, because regardless of whether or not he had a lepto vaccination, isn't going to make a difference in him breaking his leg. I said, that's where sometimes it can get a bit muddled, that people are terrified that it's going to void their insurance policy. And obviously that's a very sweeping statement for me to make. Please read your insurance policy.
Yep.
So please don't sue us. We're, you know, please do not take this advice as any
in general. That is how it happens. If you read the small print, that, and if you ask them, that is what they will say. If it's a preventable disease by vaccination won't be covered if they aren't up to date. But I hadn't heard about Lepto-6, so I'm actually a little bit in shock right now. Are you?
Sorry, I thought you knew. Yeah, Lepto-6. Ooh.
I mean, I won't bore you now, but Lepto-4 is the whole reason I ended up in this world, because of what happened with my previous Springer Spaniel Shadow. But that terrifies me, like on levels that I didn't know could be
existed. Yeah.
Oh,
I was like, like I really didn't like Lepto-2. I definitely hated Lepto-4. And you're bringing out Lepto-6. What is this? It's not an Xbox. You don't need to keep adding numbers onto it.
Oh, like that's literally made me shake a little bit. Like, oh my, that's
God, yeah.
That's.
I thought you knew. I thought it was.
No, I hadn't seen that. That's. Oh, that
because they've discontinued.
Need a drink after this.
You're gonna need it. I know it's a bit early for a gin, but it's 5 o'clock somewhere, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's terrifying. I know of a dog that developed epilepsy from lepto vaccinations. I mean, with anything there is a risk, but it's about taking a calculated risk. If your dog is in and out of minging water where rats could be or anything like that, you know, what's the risk of the vaccination to a healthy dog compared to them getting leptospirosis? Then obviously my opinions will change. My dogs are little brats and prince and princesses. Like, they absolutely will not trough about in minging water. So for me, the risk is very, very low, but it could be higher in other areas as well. Don't be afraid to ring your vet and ask, when was the last time you had a lepto case in? It's the same with Parvo and all the others, you know?
But again, I think so Ted at nearly 10 is still in all the water, still in all the mud, but I still don't use the lepto, because I've changed my focus. Rather than thinking about fear and preventing, I'm coming from a point of build a healthy immune system.
Yeah.
And support his body to do what it's designed to do naturally and to keep him healthy. So that's looking at his gut microbiome, making sure he's got a fresh food diet, and rotating his supplements and doing all of those things. What are the proactive things that I can do? And again, that changes the conversation, rather from fear of, oh my God, they're going to get sick, to okay, so what steps can I take? How can I feel? Where can I move that fear of and that level of risk into feeling something positive about it and changing it? And again, energetics isn't just energetics of the food; it's how we're feeling and what we're giving off. Because they are. You can go down the whole Heart Math Institute rabbit hole about how we interact with each other and the actual energy between us. So again, what are we telling our dogs energetically that you're going to get sick if you don't have this? So that's that's a whole nother conversation, but part of it as well. And being able to come back with that, I think, is really, really important. And I think because we're not having enough of those conversations, it's still, everything's fear-based, and we need to kind of shift it into a more kind of positive. And I'm not just like, let's all be positive. What can we do to do those things? How can we come at it from a different viewpoint?
I think I do like similar with when I'm dealing with a dog that's got a complex pain management kind of situation going on, and okay, we know this particular thing isn't working. So say for example, dog's gone out and they've overdone it, and pet parents go, "Oh my god, I've overdone it with the dog, and he looks absolutely shit for it." And I'll go, "Did they have fun? Did they find joy in that? Yeah, they loved it. Right, okay." That's fine. Like you've not been reckless, but now we need to look in our toolkit and go, right, what do we need to do now? What can we do to make sure that we can find that balance of fun and find that balance of joy in that dog's life without them having to pay tenfold for it? So again, it's about changing that conversation, especially when it comes to, say, pain perception in humans. Mood massively impacts how we feel our own pain, but also it will massively impact how we interpret our dog's pain, and how we feel that their pain perception is massively dependent on how we're feeling, how their pain management's going. So it all links in.
Totally.
Well, listen, Stacey, we've done really well, actually.
We have done. I was just looking.
Hey, that's really well done. Well done, us. So, if people like the sound of your Fetch program, where can they find you? How can they sign up? How does it all work?
Well, we're on Patreon, but everything's on my website. I've got a whole Fetch page, and you can join the newsletter. We've got a free energetics download if you come over and join the newsletter. So we've done a whole energetics download. I think there's a few other freebies coming as well. And then you can join the membership for free. And then we're going to do a monthly live Q&A where you can just jump on, ask questions about Fetch and like how you'd put a particular thing through the Fetch lens. That's our kind of thing. And then if you become a paid member, then you'll get some other goodies and an extra kind of coaching call every month where you can join us, and we can really put certain things under the lens, and we can walk you through how we'd think about something to give you that kind of feel into how you might make those decisions, and just learn the process and kind of feel into it. So yeah, there's a few different ways of doing it, but everything's on my website. I've got a whole Fetch page dedicated to it, and we've got hang on, I'm going to get this around the wrong way. At the first Friday of every month, we do a Fetch podcast where we put a subject under the Fetch lens. Nice. So far we've done, what have we done? Canine cognitive dysfunction we've done.
Amazing.
We've done yeasty beasties and dental health.
Ooh, very nice.
And already.
So your website is
Hozho Hounds.
Hozho Hounds, and your socials are at Hozho Hounds?
Yeah, I'm all, everything's
yeah.
I told you that Stacey was super passionate about canine health and nutrition. This Fetch membership sounds like nothing else that I've seen on the market for pet parents and pet professionals as well. I really do see Stacey making waves over the coming years, and I can't wait to see how this falls out for her. Thank you so much for joining. As I said, if you've enjoyed this content, please make sure to like, share and subscribe. Lots of love to you and your dogs. Take care for now. Bye.